Hello, and welcome to the live series Straight Off the Bat. Join us on Thursdays as we speak to individuals from multiple industries that will help you understand financial literacy and education. If you join us on Facebook, don't forget to like and follow our page to stay updated with content that help you manage your money. I'm your host, Pauline Joseph, and conversations around entrepreneurship in Trinidad and Tobago are important, more important than ever, especially for those ready to turn big ideas into real action. And today we're going to talk about how to think like an entrepreneur in Trinidad and Tobago. And we are joined by Shedron Collins. He is the CEO of the Youth Business of Trinidad and Tobago, as well as Adanna Austin. She's the CEO of Marketing Dynamics Business Solutions. So, hello and welcome.
Hi, nice to be
Hi,
here.
good morning, good morning.
All right.
Thank you for
So, a
having me.
lot of people think an hour is a long time, but entrepreneurship is a wealth of knowledge that needs to be shared at this point in time. So we're going to start really into it when it comes to describing the difference between a fixed and a growth mindset, because I've actually seen this around, a lot of us click blogs or see headlines, but we don't necessarily understand what these things mean. And we want to find out exactly what these things are and how this affects the entrepreneurial space in Trinidad and Tobago. So who wants to start with a bang?
Anyone? I believe in our space of Trinidad and Tobago, you're very correct. We have different type of entrepreneurs. We have those who have a fixed mindset, and we have those who have a growth mindset. And when we talk about that, a fixed mindset means where there's a lot of doubt. I want to always break it down into really practical terms. There's a lot of doubt. There's a lot of fear. About moving forward, about what should I do next. And, there's always that questioning of self, right? That's a very fixed mindset, meaning, I don't want to do it any other way. This is how I always do it. So this is what I will continue to do. A growth mindset is the opposite of that, which means that you're open to change, you're open to try new things. Even though you may have doubts, you have those tools and resources that help you to push forward, and you can actually see how you can move your business forward. And I find that with a lot of entrepreneurs in our space, yes, you find the fixed and you find the growth, but you find a lot more people in the middle, right? They have a fixed mindset about certain things and they have a growth mindset about other parts of their business.
Thank you so
Yeah,
much for that, Adanna. And it's interesting. I think we have, yes. So it's interesting when you were talking about the fixed mindset, because I can imagine anyone out there in Trinidad and Tobago could reference a parent or family member with that fixed mindset.
Oh,
You know
yes.
who I'm talking about.
Yes.
I know who I'm talking about. So
Yes, we do.
let's try to break those generational curses and evolve. So we're going to ask Shedron this question because YBTT is celebrating 25 years. It's a big thing, and I think it's also great that you are part of the Gen Z. So when it comes to the personal turning point where you may shift your mindset in order to move forward, can you give us maybe some examples? Because being in the space that you're in, you have real examples that you can share with us. So give us some insight.
yeah. I'm close to the roadside, so there was a loud speaker passing by. So I guess in terms of having to shift mindset for us, I think I can speak to a personal note for us in terms of YBTT. Um, and even transitioning. So I've been part of YBTT for the last 16 years of that 25, right? And you've my position would have changed from having to be deeply involved in helping persons tweak their business plans and really work with that to now figuring out where should the organization go and what's the vision and those aspects, and having to kind of shift your mindset from doing the day-to-day to now, okay, well, all of these challenges are coming at me. How do I think entrepreneurial? How do I bootstrap because we're a not-for-profit. How do I bootstrap? How do I do all these different things and change it and not see challenges? Okay, well, this business plan is not working out, but start to see challenges as learning opportunities. And that kind of shift had to kind of come naturally on set and right away because it was now a quick shift. So it wasn't like a time to groom and those kind of things. It was already a quick shift into that position. And that in itself led me to realize that along the way, you kind of have to fail. And when we talk about that growth mindset, going back to the growth mindset is all about learning from failure and seeing challenges as opportunities. So we've probably lost a couple of donors along the way, and that made us really think, okay, well, the learning from that is how do we build connections and not just look for funding. And I think that was the whole learning process that we had to go through.
Thanks so much for that, Shedron. And it's interesting that you mentioned failing because it's not part of our culture in Trinidad and Tobago. And I personally have failed many, many times. And one of my biggest failures as an entrepreneur was I went into really, really, really silly debt and I made some bad decisions. And I had to go back into full-time employment. It took a year. So I went from, oh my gosh, stop calling my phone. I don't have money to pay you, to why did you give me so much credit? Please reduce my credit. So it is a journey, and I think I would like Adanna as well to add to that when it comes to sharing a major setback, because unfortunately, as I mentioned earlier, culturally, failure is not something that we necessarily talk about or even are able to express, because we have this fear of, okay, what is going to happen to me? I'm going to be think of less. So, Adanna, could you share a setback that you may have had?
Oh, well, I've had many setbacks because I'm an entrepreneur, and that's just part of the journey of being an entrepreneur. And I'm glad that we are bringing that up, because a lot of people feel that, if you fail at some part of the journey, it means that the whole business has failed. I mean, I have had launches with my products or services that have completely fallen flat, right? I would have spent time putting together a launch and putting it out there and really advertising it and gotten no one to buy. And that's a normal thing. And as Shedron said, it was an opportunity for us to learn about what actually works and what doesn't work, so that we can tweak and we can adjust how we approach, how we speak to our audience, how we present our offers to our audience and that kind of thing. So I've had a lot of launches throughout my journey, because I've been doing this since 2011. So I've had a lot of launches that have fallen flat, and it has given me the opportunity to adjust my approach, adjust how I speak, how I show up, and that kind of thing. So I think that's a very, very normal part of your entrepreneurial journey, and I want people to really understand that.
Yes, then I want to head over to the comments because we're joined by Ion on YouTube. Good morning, joining us from Makoya. We also have Riwa joining us from Arima on YouTube. Thanks for joining us today. And if you have any questions, you have fantastic guests who will answer your questions today. You have about 50 more minutes. So make sure and slide into the comments and let us know. So I want to ask Shedron, as it relates to being in this space, you mentioned being in YBTT for 16 years. I'm sure that you've seen some things. And when it comes to emotionally and mentally bouncing back from this failure that we're talking about, can you share maybe one or two examples? Because I think we need to elaborate more on this conversation because it's not happening enough.
I think there's a challenge that a lot of entrepreneurs face, and I had to overcome it myself. The saying there's it's lonely at the top. Sometimes it feels like it's lonely being an entrepreneur, right? You're not. People don't understand. Okay, why you starting this business thing, and why you're doing that? Go and try to get a job, and the failures keep piling on, and you realize that something is wrong with the business, and because you're so close to the business, you start to think, okay, well, something is wrong with me, and that itself is going to affect you emotionally and mentally. And sometimes you feel like you want to curl up in a ball and hide under your desk, right? And hide from the world. But I think it's reconnecting always with the purpose. And that's why we try to tell a lot of entrepreneurs the best businesses to start are the ones that are connected to you, your passion, and your purpose. Because then you have something to return to kind of figure out, okay, how could I center myself and deal with the next step going forward? Without that, you're now left with trying to keep overcoming challenges, but there's nothing to center you back to, okay, this is why we started. This is what I wanted to do. This is why I wanted to do it. Let me take a few breaths, take a few minutes, and move forward. And I always put in mentorship as a not someone to just learn off of, but someone to actually speak to. Because especially if you're a solo entrepreneur and it's you alone in the business, a mentor isn't just someone to help you with, okay, I need to help with my finance and my product. It might just be simply someone to talk to. And from my mentors, I know you've become therapists sometimes, but from an entrepreneur, you have to kind of see failure as not just final, but as feedback, as you kind of pulling off from the last conversation we had. Right? Failure isn't just final, it's feedback. And how do you incorporate that feedback mentally and overcome it emotionally to go forward? Always the next step.
And I think the conversation around mentorship is so important because full transparency, I go to therapy because mental health is just as important as physical health. And
Yes.
I remember my therapist was telling me because I was sharing some stuff that was happening with my business, and she says, I'm not capable of advising you in those things. I think you need someone in the professional space to mentor, and it doesn't matter how successful or how much you may think that you're feeling. Everyone needs a mentor to have a conversation with and to relate to each other. So, there are certain habits that we may form. And I want Adanna to kind of, chime in on this. What are maybe some one or two habits that you think would help us stay grounded and productive and focused, especially in a world that it's so easy to be distracted online?
Well, coming off of what Shedron said, I think one of the major things is to get a mentor, first of all. But for me, one of the other things that I do is I have accountability partners, and they help me stay grounded because in speaking about our business, we share a lot about our business. We share our goals. I just visited one of my accountability partners yesterday, and we share our goals, we share our visions, we share our dreams, and we hold each other accountable. Meaning, she will turn to me and say, "So, what is happening with this? When do you want this to happen?" And I would say the same to her. I would say, "So, what advice would you give yourself? What are your goals around this thing?" And I think having that type of support, including mentorship, really helps you to get clarity and help you to move forward. So as Shedron said as well, it does feel lonely being an entrepreneur, but if you can create that kind of community around your business, it really helps you to stay grounded and stay focused. Some of the other things that I do a lot of journaling. Every single day, I write out what my vision is for the day or even for the month. Sometimes it gets personal because sometimes your personal mixes with your business. It's not a cut and dry. So I do a lot of journaling, I do a lot of writing, and I'm a type A personality, so I plan everything down to a T. I have checklists, and it could be for the slightest thing, the smallest thing in my business. I have checklists. I'm just ticking those things off at the end of the day, seeing all of those things highlighted and ticked off gives me a sense of accomplishment, right? Because I tell people, get it out of your head. If you just have the ideas in your head, you just keep building ideas upon ideas. So get it on paper, write it down. It becomes a lot more real when you write it down. And just go through it one at a time, and don't try to overwhelm yourself. Take your time and go through it one at a time. Those are some of the things that I do to stay focused and to stay grounded.
Thanks for that, Adanna. And that conversation around trying to, you know, go from ideas to execution. I think we need to elaborate more on that because many of us have ideas, but a
Yes.
lot of us don't, assign the amount of work that needs to be done to be successful. And I see Shedron smiling, so he will probably take that question, but we will ask that question right after the break. We'll be right back. And welcome back to Straight Off the Bat, a show that helps you understand financial literacy and education. Thank you so much for joining us today. And if you're doing so from YouTube, like Kevin from Tobago, don't forget to smash that subscribe button so you can continue seeing content that'll help you manage your money. Today, we're discussing how to think like an entrepreneur in Trinidad and Tobago, and we're joined by Shedron and Adanna. I'm going to bring them back in. And before the break, we were talking about ideas being a dime a dozen. So when it comes to ideas and execution, I would like Shedron to share, with your background at the youth business Trinidad and Tobago, what is some of the sort of the pitfalls you see folks who may feel very strong about their ideas, but the execution and the other things aren't lining up? What are the big gaps there?
Well, sometimes we're stuck on just ideas, right? There's I was trying to find that Denzel quote while but there's that Denzel quote where he says, "Dreams without goals are just dreams, and ultimately they fuel disappointment." And I think it comes back to what I usually tell persons: vision without an action becomes a burden, and we have to figure out ways as entrepreneurs. How do you move from having an idea to getting things forward? I think Adanna spoke about getting an accountability partner, right? Accountability is really something that you need on the onset. It's not just when your business gets started, but once you have that idea, speak that idea into existence, let people know about it, because then it becomes real to you, and then it becomes a focus to actually execute. And you don't have to wait until the idea is perfect, right? You just need to have progress, right? So how do we take the next step and progress? I always tell person, action breeds clarity, right? You don't know what this idea or dream is going to be until you start taking some action, right? And that is really what you need to focus on.
And in the same breath of action, Adanna, I want to find out, maybe share some advice, because there may be times that you have an idea and you start with an action, but you keep being met with hurdles, especially when we're a bit of a closed-minded society. I know, guys, that's an opinion. This is just being expressed by me. But the support and mentorship and things like that are very hard to find. So if you have this idea and you're pushing for execution and you're getting all these hurdles, what advice do you have for an entrepreneur?
So I think that a lot of times entrepreneurs come up with hurdles because they are not sure like what step to do first. I had mentorship with just an entrepreneur last night, and I had to tell her, pause. I'm like, what is happening in the next 5 days of your business? What you're talking about should happen in 12 months, but what's happening in the next 5 days of your business? One of the things I always recommend when you're thinking about your idea is to write it down. Write everything down and be very, very clear about what you can do and what you cannot do. Understand where you have your limitations, understand where you can get the resources. But more importantly, a step that a lot of entrepreneurs miss is that they don't do market research. So even though the idea sounds great to you, you have to do some type of market research to make sure that whatever you're offering is something that is needed and needed in the way that you may be thinking. Because I've seen a lot of times where when I encourage my entrepreneurs to do some market research, they come back to me and they say, "Oh my gosh, Adanna, I didn't even think about it this way. This person told me this, or this person told me that. I never thought about it that way. So let me adjust how I was going to offer this thing or what I was going to offer so that it fits into what my ideal clients actually want." And that can actually help you eliminate a lot of the hurdles that you're going to experience. Yeah. In addition to getting a mentor, we're always going back to that, right? In addition to getting a mentor and testing before you do this grand launch of everything, test out your idea, not just with your mommy and your brother, but test out your idea with as many people as possible to make sure that it's feasible. Make sure it's something that people actually want and actually need, so that you will eliminate a lot of those hurdles. And there's a lot of information out there. I mean, you just use Google. There's a lot of information. Bankers Association, for example, they put out a lot of information. Do your research, because entrepreneurship means that you are continually learning. Nobody knows everything. You have to make sure that you have that mindset, and we go back to that conversation, where you are continually learning things as you grow, as you set up your business, as you start to expand on your ideas. We're not hearing you, Pauline.
Woo, I
Okay,
thought that was over, but clearly I'm still I'm still in lockdown mode. Okay, so I was referencing one of the comments on YouTube from Karis, and he has a question that I also would love to know the answer to.
uh-huh.
So we'll ask Shedron this. How do you get mentors? Like, what is the initial conversation like to get mentors? And particularly when the mentor is not a part of your circle of friends or associates?
Yeah. So I think that ship in front of men after mentorship is
Yes.
speaking to a relationship,
Yeah.
right? And it's going into any relationship. So if you're going into a new relationship, what are the questions you're going to ask? You want to get to know the person, right? I had a conversation yesterday, and they asked, well, how do you go about finding a mentor? And I said, well, have you asked anyone? As simple as that, right? Is there anyone that you see their patterns in terms of how they're running their business? I mean, talking about business first, right? How they're running their business, how they're motivating their team, maybe how they're even working in terms of public speaking, right? And it's something that you really want to develop in yourself. And you need someone who, as a mentor, can help you figure out, not do it for you or not as a consultant, but someone just to have a conversation with. So go in with a mentorship relationship, speaking about this being a relationship I'm trying to develop and build, right? Not all their relationships were always in your circle. How did you speak to a new friend? How did you go to a networking event and had conversations with persons and say, I really like how you're thinking. Are you available to mentor? That's probably your first question that you're asking them after the conversation. So think connection first, and then you can start asking around mentorship. Oh, and then, well, YBTT, we have mentors.
Agreed.
So
Yes.
a shameless plug as well.
Wait. No, say that again, Shedron. You didn't say
No, I
that
just say
loud enough. So
YBTT has mentors. I was just saying YBTT also has mentors. So that's a shameless plug as part of it.
that's a plug that's absolutely necessary. And I'd like to add to what you said, Shedron, because I, unfortunately, but due to nothing beyond my control, I didn't go to university. And obviously, that's where a lot of people make their friends and their connections. So for me, I use social media. I use
Yes.
LinkedIn. Like, I went to an event yesterday. A person invited me who became my friend because she DM'd me for coffee on LinkedIn, and I got an opportunity to network in a space that I would have never done without her.
Yeah.
So I think it's important. I just want to reiterate what Shedron said. And I want to have I guess a controversial question. I will direct this to Adanna. How do you feel about people who charge for mentorship?
Wow. That is because I've seen both angles of it, and I don't think it's right or wrong. I think sometimes it depends on the industry that you may be in, that some people feel that they need to charge, because for them it may be more than just having a conversation with you, but giving you access to their circles, or giving you access to certain tools and resources that they have, that they hold very dear, and they also had to maybe pay to get in to those spaces. So I mean, I don't think it's right or wrong. I really think it depends on the industry, and I've seen both sides of the coin. For myself, I don't usually charge for mentorship, because for me, I am just helping you to get clarity on what you want to achieve in your business and even in your life. But I don't think it's right or wrong. It really depends on the relationship, it depends on the industry, and it depends on what that mentor is willing to share with you.
Well, thanks for that. I know that was a difficult question. As well as, it's not a plug for anything. I have no affiliation, neither does Pat. There's an app called Upnotch. It's free. It comes out of Silicon Valley, and I signed up for it, and I actually got 2 meetings, one with one of the head public relations of Microsoft globally. So there are, as Adanna mentioned before, Google is an amazing tool for you to find this information. So Karis, we will put that link so you can check it out. And Taki on Facebook has said, and I guess that this feels like a very powerful response. Mentorship is not a paid service. This is coaching. But obviously, this is something that we're not necessarily going to evolve. It's just something that I wanted to ask. All right. So when it comes to, mindset, because it's something that I think with Shedron Space and your job, you would have, encountered a lot of entrepreneurs the last 16 years. What's one of the major blocks that you see your entrepreneurs basically encountering, especially when it comes to being in Trinidad and Tobago and in our culture? And what's the best way to overcome it?
I mean, we're talking about mindsets.
Just in terms of a block that they may have in mindset, yes.
Yeah. Right. Well, at the starting stage, I think it's believing that you need to get all your ducks in a row before testing or going out with your idea. Sometimes it's the best advice I have for a person is bake that cupcake and give somebody to taste it. Right? We talked about action bleeds clarity. Until you can actually start building momentum, right? Just create something, test it out, whether people like it or not. It is feedback. As we talk about, failure isn't final, it's feedback, right? It is information. So it's all about not just sitting down with an idea and saying, what if we do this? What if we do this? And what if we do? Just do something and test it out. Within Trinidad and Tobago, I think we do have a lot of creative entrepreneurs who not just creative entrepreneurs who do creative things in the sense that if I need to test an idea, maybe I might just offer a couple of things for free. I might say, okay, somebody's having a fete or a party. I'm going back to the cupcakes and say, well, I do these kind of cupcakes. You okay if I come through and do some taste testers, right? And get some person to taste it from there. So I think you always, again, make sure you do your testing with curry and all those different things first. You don't want to end up with a bigger problem. But that action is really the step that I think a lot of entrepreneurs feel to take. When you're getting into business, you have a heavy feeling of that imposter syndrome, as I didn't really think I'm comfortable doing this. Your first time somebody may be asking you to come and speak at a graduation or speak in an event, you realize that I'm not doing that much, and you're that common block of moving the next step forward is that imposter syndrome that you're always dealing with. So it's that failure to take action when you're at the start, and once you've started, is now believing that you are an entrepreneur. No matter how many years you have under your belt, you still have some experience and years under your belt starting.
Okay. So we do want to have a conversation that elaborates on the mentorship because I know Shedron, you have that space and experience. But that's just going to be a little teaser because we're going to have to elaborate on that after the break. So we'll be right back.
But that was like my first experience with money. Very, very first experience.
I've been in banking since I was a teenager.
And welcome back to Straight Off the Bat, a show that helps you understand financial literacy and education. Thank you so much for joining us today. And if you're doing so from LinkedIn, don't forget to subscribe to our page to continue seeing content that will help you manage your money. Today, we're discussing how to think like an entrepreneur in Trinidad and Tobago, and we're joined by Shedron and Adanna, and we've had quite a robust conversation. Don't worry, when this show has ended, you can check it out on the replay across YouTube and LinkedIn, as well as we do have this show being rebroadcast on TV6 on Mondays at 8 p.m. So before the break, we were having a conversation around mentorship, and there was someone who said that mentorship to them in the comments on Facebook, which is something you can also do, ask any questions. They believe that mentorship is different to coaching, which is paid. So Shedron, you wanted to add to that?
Well, I mean, that was actually probably the ad I wanted to make. So I think when people think about mentorship, it's really around volunteering information, advice. Well, it's supposed to be around volunteering advice, information, and insights, and sharing your experience. That is really what mentorship is. Now, if you're looking for something more, getting into the realm of consultancy, getting into the realm of coaching, which are paid services, right? So I think people have to understand the blurred line in terms of where mentorship starts and ends, which is typically free and unpaid. But when you get into the realm of, okay, so I need somebody to really sit with me and help me do my books for the last year, that isn't mentorship. That's consultancy. And I think sometimes the lines between the two are blurred. And therefore, the concept of what mentorship is versus consultancy and coaching also gets blurred.
Yeah, Shedron, it gave me a little trigger there because I've had many friends be like, you have a minute? 2 hours later, they want to have free consultancy work. I was like, this is not
It's
what
how it works.
This is not how it works.
Yeah.
My time actually has value. So when it comes to in a smaller society like Trinidad and Tobago, I would like to direct this conversation to Adanna because we do have, to me, a very strong community focus as a small society. But when it comes to networking and the authenticity of it, what advice you may have, or maybe shall I elaborate on networking versus transactional networking? Because we feel it. We feel when somebody's trying to sell us. I mean, just looking at emails and like, do you have a quick minute? No.
Yeah.
So what's your take on that?
Well, I think that you're right. I think people approach networking like really a transaction. And I encourage you to approach networking like if you want to build a relationship with somebody, because it's really about building relationships throughout your journey as an entrepreneur, right? So if you go to a networking event per se, you want to go in there really with the intention of meeting new people, of building a connection, asking them questions, not just selling what you have to offer, but asking them questions as well, and seeing how you can take that relationship even outside of this event. Part of the networking is also about you learning from others, right? Because in these networking events is where you find a lot of your mentors as well. So don't knock it, but it's also an opportunity for you to learn from others. So you have to go with your ears and make sure that you're listening to what people say. Ask probing questions. Yes, share about yourself, but don't go with the intention of selling, because I always tell people, you make a sale much easier if you are authentic, if you just show up as yourself and you just show that the human side of yourself. It's so much easier for people to trust you and then want to engage with you if you do that. So you want to go with the intention of listening, building a connection, and also learning, and also understand that at those networking events, whether it's online or it's in person, that's not the end of the relationship, right? That's the beginning of the relationship. So you want to figure out, how can I then take this relationship further? If it's somebody you identify you want to have a connection with, how do I take that relationship further or beyond this particular space where we met? And just share your stories, because one thing I think a lot of entrepreneurs don't recognize is that we have so many similar stories. So many of us have gone through the trenches the same way. We've gone through a lot of the same experiences, and because we feel that nobody will understand, nobody else has gone through this, we keep ourselves isolated, when the reality is so many of us have experienced the exact same thing or are presently experiencing the exact same thing. So you want to make those type of connections in a very authentic way in your networking, and just speak like you're trying to make friends. I know as adults it's always like, how do I make more friends? But that's how you do it, right? It's about making friendships and building those kinds of relationships.
And it's so interesting what you're saying, Adanna, because if anybody follows the influencer Kyle, all you need to do is look at his comments and see why we all living the same life.
Yes,
Because
we are.
we've all had that situation where they're like, food. We have food at home.
Yes, the parents,
You know,
Caribbean parents. Oh my gosh.
exactly. And so that's not just Caribbean parents, sometimes it goes beyond that, and having a
Yes.
global conversation is very common. And I wanna sort of shift this conversation, especially since Shedron has experience in the not-for-profit space. Given some advice on how to cultivate relationships that are rooted in purpose, because obviously, as a not-for-profit, you're juggling a lot and having to have those conversations and the value proposition that you're giving to folks who would contribute to YBTT. Give us some insight on how do you manage that?
Yeah, I think Adanna spoke about it as well, in terms of, it's even when you're going to networking isn't about showing up at events, but it's also, how do you show up all the time and create value? You're not just you're not just starting the conversation to see what you can get, but you also try to start that conversation to see what you can give. And I think that goes into building any long-term relationship. It isn't a transaction. You're not trying to sell something, but you're really trying to build that connection, because it's all about shared momentum. And if we can achieve shared momentum, then we're really making a connection. It's not just benefiting you, it's not just benefiting me, but we're benefiting each other by having that connection. And that in itself is where you can feel that, these relationships have a purpose, right? So the relationships with purpose are those with a connection from there. And obviously creating that mutual momentum and value.
Okay. And in this same breath and conversation about creating momentum and value, I would be remiss if I don't have the conversation around using social media and key platforms to leveraging, an audience, because we were asked earlier about how to, test certain things. Shedron spoke about that cupcake, and at this point in time, I'm ready to go buy one after this call. So when it comes to, looking at some key platforms that small businesses need to leverage, could you give us some advice, Adanna, on how to connect with customers, suppliers, investors?
I would say your market research, right? The first thing I would say is look at who is already in the industry. That's your first indicator, your first marker. And you're looking at them not to copy what they're doing, obviously, because you want to make sure that your voice is unique, how you show up is unique. But look at who is already in the industry, doing what you're doing, or doing something similar to what you're doing. Look at where they're showing up, look at how they're showing up, look at what they're sharing, look at what the questions their audience is asking, and use that as a measure of where you may want to start. Again, market research is so very important, and it's something that a lot of entrepreneurs skip over, and it's not something that you only do at the beginning of the business, right? It's a consistent thing. We do market research in our business every 6 months, right? Because we want to make sure that we're always on the pulse of what is trending, what is happening, where the mindset of our ideal clients are. We ask them questions, we do surveys, we send out to them, we do it on our personal pages, we do it in our groups, we share it in other groups, we share it with our family and friends if they are our ideal clients. But getting that type of information and asking the right questions as well, right, will help you to gather information so that you can make more informed decisions about your business moving forward. That market research element, I just, I really, really stress it so much, because we miss the mark by just feeling that we know all of the information, right? Google is our friend, yes, but do that market research, put it out there so that you get real life feedback from persons who would be ready to buy whatever your offer is, so that you can make a more informed decision.
So important, especially in the digital age where there's so much information out there. A tool like Google Trends, for instance, you can research how people search for things. So, Shedron, I'd like to ask you about the benefits of being in a smaller country, because, when I'm traveling and I have to explain where Trinidad and Tobago is, and no, Rihanna is not from there, there are benefits.
And it's not in Jamaica.
Oh, that's a whole other conversation.
Yeah.
So can you share some insight and benefits to being from a small island, and how that would benefit an entrepreneur?
Great. I just said no realizing from here. I remember Nicki Minaj. I always, if I go to the US, I always see the place with Nicki Minaj. If I'm going to the Europe side, I see the place where Brian Lara is from. Right? So you always have to kind of manage those two things. Now, I think connections for us within a small island is a lot easier. We talk about the degrees of separation. They say nobody's more than 7 degrees of separation from another contact within the world. Now, it's in a small island, I think you're probably 4 degrees of separation from anybody. You must know somebody who knows the person that you might want to talk to and connect with. But the question is, are you leveraging your networks, your connections, in order to grow your networks and connections? And that's really what the benefits are. So I think that's one of the benefits. Now, everything can be basically found in any place. If you're in Trinidad and Tobago, it probably would take you 3-4 hours max to reach any point in the island. I'm saying this from somebody from Point Fortin who usually has to go to Port of Spain or sometimes Toco. I think one day I did Port of Spain, Toco, then Princestown, then back to Point Fortin. Right? So there's never too far. There's no way too far in Trinidad that you can't go. And yes, persons who live in north, south is more than just lighthouse, right? But I think that degrees of separation and connection is one of the benefits. You're never too far from anything. Obviously, we face our challenges, especially when you're thinking about expanding. You now have to go to another island, or you may have to go to another country to actually to expand to that great extent, which also is more costly. You can't really just drive to Jamaica. You can't drive to Barbados, right? You have to take a flight there, and that costs money to you as well. So that's a disadvantage. But if you're working within that Trinidad and Tobago space, you're always thinking about, hey, we talked about mentorship, and you're trying to figure out how to connect to mentors. If you see someone that you idolize, tell yourself you're 4 degrees of separation from that person, and you can connect with someone who could connect you to someone else who could connect you to that person. You're never too far away. And that's really what you have to leverage on a small island. Connections and your location is never too far from someone else.
It's funny, as you're talking, I was like, wow, this this idea of anytime I meet somebody from away and I say I'm from Trinidad, they go, oh, I used to work with this guy 5 years ago. He's from Trinidad. His name's, and I was just like,
They feel you know everyone, right?
and the worst thing is when it actually is true.
Yes. Yep. Yes. It happened many times.
Let's try to find the positive as an entrepreneur in everything, and I think that is definitely one of those. All right, so we are winding on a bit, but we will go on a break, and when we come back, we actually have a program that we're gonna find out about, and we also want to ask the difficult questions about what companies are doing to help entrepreneurs. So we'll be right back. Welcome back to Straight Off the Bat, a show that helps you understand about financial literacy and education. Thank you so much for joining us today. And if you're doing so from Facebook, don't forget to subscribe to our page to continue seeing content that will help you manage your money. Today, we're discussing how to think like an entrepreneur in Trinidad and Tobago, and we're joined by Shedron and Adanna. We have been having this discussion for a minute, so not to worry. If you miss any of this, you can check it out on a replay on LinkedIn and YouTube, possibly Facebook. But we are also on TV6 every Monday at 8 p.m. on rebroadcast. So just before the break, we were discussing about, what are the benefits of being in Trinidad and Tobago and leveraging your community. But we do have a question that I want to get to before I ask my question. And it's very interesting. I'm going to direct this to Adanna. It's from Star K on Facebook. Customers would tell you about your product and how it worked, but when it comes to giving pictures that you can use to show before and after, how can you work around that when your business is based on showing before and after photos as proof that your product works?
And I'm assuming that this may be if they're using a product, let's say for acne or something like that, right? You have to become your test dummies sometimes. You have to show it on yourself. That's why if you think about businesses that sell clothes, they hire models and that kind of thing. So if you could identify one or two people in your circle who you can use as testimonials so that they can show, so you're taking your own pictures from them, right? So they can show the before and after. In that way, you have a lot more control of how it shows up, because I know sometimes asking clients to send you the pictures can feel daunting and you feel like you're begging them. And sometimes life is life, and so they really don't have time. Don't take it as a personal affront. But if that is something that you know that is necessary for the promotion of your business, then you have to take it into your own hands. Identify 2 or 3 people that you know in your inner circle that you trust, who you know need and are using your products, and use them as your examples of before and after.
Gosh, Adanna, that will not take it personal. I'm still learning that.
Yeah, don't take anything personal.
Shout out to Michael joining us from YouTube, as well as the Shadow Network is taking notes. So both of us are taking notes, not to worry. All right. So when it comes to, how can we get support? Shedron, I would like you to let us know how can financial institutions, organizations, agencies can better support connecting entrepreneurs for long-term growth and sustainability, because we have been talking about this for quite some time, and that's the idea of growing your network. So how can we get support from the corporate space as well as public sector?
Yeah, I think you kind of have to be there to get the support. So as much as you're building connections with your customers and others in your networks, are you building connections with the support ecosystem as well, right? So do you know someone in X organization X? Do you know someone in organization Y? And what are you doing to connect to that person? It might just be going and finding out some more information and building that connection from there. I think from the other end, from the stakeholders end, we kind of have to do a bit more outreach and do some niche outreach and specialized outreach to our entrepreneurs, because it's always a challenge, because there's sometimes so much information that you're just stifled and you don't know which organization I need to go for this kind of funding, right? So eventually, and with support, we will develop a ecosystem map, an active ecosystem map, so that you can connect with persons that you need to connect with right away. And because the ecosystem is always changing, Google Google became your best friend. Sometimes you're searching for particular keywords, funding, grants, but also search for more beyond funding and grants without Trinidad and Tobago. You have to think regionally and internationally for funding, but get to know your institutions. Back in 2016, 2017, and hopefully we'll bring it back again. We had a connect and sign event where we brought various organizations into one space, because we recognize that what was one of the biggest challenge that entrepreneurs face is that they actually didn't know the organizations. They kind of heard about them and they were confused in terms of what they actually offered. But sometimes having that meeting, and we had about 400 person in this one Hasty Covered Stadium, right, coming in throughout a course of 2 days, just to connect with the organizations. And you didn't come and connect with one, you connected with about 7 organizations, just to kind of hear, okay, well, what do you have to offer? And can I sign up for a program right now? And I think the more of those events, if anybody wants to take that idea and go with it, then that's fine. Let's make sure you invite YBTT to have a booth, right? But more of those events that are happening where persons can not just connect with one organization, but they can connect with the ecosystem, because one organization isn't a be all end all, right? So you have to connect with as much organizations as possible. And I think the running theme for this whole conversation is about building connections. We're going to keep working on that.
Okay, thank you so much for that. And also thank you to Robert, who's joining us from Nairobi, Kenya. We do have a worldwide audience today, apparently. Thank you so much, Robert. All right, so, Chedro was talking about a plug. I think it's time to have this conversation around the startup program, Adanna, because, we've been doing this show for a little over 4 years now. And within, the responsibility of financial literacy and education is so important. I, as the host, have learned a lot from this show. But we want to talk a little bit more about what BAT is doing with the startup program. So you want to share some insight?
Oh, definitely. So this year, we just completed the startup program. And I think this is our third startup program. Our first startup program was in 2022. We started off in Tobago. And this year was the first time we did it in Trinidad. And the startup program is really a 6-week program, a free program hosted by Bankers Association, where twice a week we teach entrepreneurs about starting and growing their business. And we work them through how to create their business plan, how to go from idea to execution. We had a lot of guest speakers from the different banks that were coming in and talking to them about registering their business, how to do a cash flow documents, about fraud, about online banking, about exporting, about record keeping. It was really a packed program. We had over 165 entrepreneurs who were present throughout the 6 weeks. They stayed on board, and every week we also gave them assignments. So they didn't just come and listen to us talk. They had to actually get into action and submit assignments to us. And we had 3 mentors who would go through the assignments and give them feedback. But what I really love about the startup program, and I hope we have another one next year or at least the end of this year, but what I really loved about the startup program was the diverse businesses. I mean, the type of ideas we have out there, we are so talented in Trinidad and Tobago, right? But in addition to, after the 6 weeks were completed, we are now at the stage where we are providing mentorship for the entrepreneurs. So we're not just, leaving them high and dry. You have your business plan, okay, adios. Now they have the opportunity to speak to us, the mentors. We have 3 mentors, one-on-one, about their business plans, about their next steps, about what they want to do and what resources they may need to take that next step in their business. It's really, really an exciting program. And I hope when we launch the next series or the next cohort that we get so many more entrepreneurs coming on board to get that level of support. It was really a fabulous program.
Thank you so much for that. I think that is something that we all need to hear, that these types of programs do exist. And we are a very talented nation. Sometimes we need to be reminded. So we're going to close off a bit. So I love to close off with something positive. So Shedron, can you share to the aspiring and the current entrepreneurs out there who may feel like there's nothing, there's no support, there's nothing happening, what kind of advice would you give them? And you're giving a little mentor session that no one paid for. This is free advice.
All right, I'll know where to stop because it's mentoring. But I think at the heart of any entrepreneur is the right mindset and passion. The businesses would sometimes change, the products that you develop might sometimes fail. But once you can keep that right mindset, and we talked about the growth mindset, which is that you're continuously learning, you're seeing challenges as opportunities, but also you've clearly understand and grounded in your passion. That's really most of the work there. The pushing of the business is also a little more on the technical side, but those things would come. It's not really just about business plan and funding. If you really have that growth mindset and that passion, you tend to try to figure things out. And if you can't figure it out, part of that growth mindset is, how do I connect with someone who can help me figure it out, right? And so I think that is the be all and end all. And then that's a kind of shameless plug again. We have a couple of programs coming up, so you can look on YBT page. We have leadership and team building that we're going to do next week. So feel free to join us for that as well. Thanks, man.
So I'm going to help you with that shameless plug, Shedron, because YBTT is on social media. So check them out across. They're even on TikTok. So check them out and see what information they have. So Adanna, would you like to close us off with something inspirational?
Yes. What I liked, and I've said it before in this session, is continue to learn. Just be open to new experiences. Find those mentors, find those accountability partners, but find spaces where you can consistently learn. And my shameless plug is that I have a group of over 4,000 entrepreneurs on Facebook called Dynamic Business Strategists. It's free to join. And in that group, we have entrepreneurs from across the Caribbean, but we have so many different types of entrepreneurs in there. So if you're looking for support to register your business, to open a bank account, to do almost anything that you can think about in business, in Dynamic Business Strategists, you can find that person. It's not an advertising group, but it's a group where we learn, we support each other. I do free training in there every Wednesday at 12. And, I'm always sharing valuable information. I'm sharing tips and tools and resources, because I really believe that as an entrepreneur, we have to continually learn. We have to continually be educating ourselves, because, Pauline, you would know things change so quickly, right? Things change so quickly in all of these industries. So you have to find spaces where you can be heard, find spaces where you can also contribute, you can learn, and that will help you to stay ahead of the game. And guys, remember, you don't have to do it perfect. You just have to do it. It does not have to be perfect. Do it a little at a time, a piece at a time, until you get it done. I like to tell my entrepreneurs, do 2 or 3 things every day to get you closer to that goal that you want, right? But join us in Dynamic Business Strategists on Facebook, and let's give you the support you need.
Well, thank you so much for that, Adanna, as well as thank you to Shedron for joining us today and sharing insight into how to think like an entrepreneur in Trinidad and Tobago. As for Julian, hi, I know you're joining us from Cuba. You're a little late, so that's okay. When the show ends, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel and it will be on the replay. Don't forget to sign up to notify on our next live show. All of the information is in the comments, and some of the things we shared would also be in the comments wherever you are looking at this on social media. As always, be sure to like and follow our pages across social media so you don't miss a single live show. And thank you so much for joining us today. Bye.